All right, this is Crash Canon. I am Chris, the host, and I've got a guest today. Why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Hey, this is Taylor Marshall. How y'all doing?
Yeah, Dr. Taylor Marshall was kind enough to join us tonight, so I appreciate you being here. Oh, I got my own. My apologies. I apparently had a YouTube thing open and I was hearing myself talk.
Yeah.
That was really annoying. I
apologize. Happens to me about once every 15 times.
So, anyways, really appreciate you being here, especially given that you just wrote this fantastic book, The Christian Patriot. And if you want to get this, I've got a link in the chats, the pinned comment for the signed copy. You guys still have some available, right?
I think they're sold out. I heard they were.
Okay.
I think they might be sold out, but you can still go to Christian Patriot. I think the ones that Bucker and I signed might be sold out, but there's still ones that just, I myself signed by myself. So you can get those.
Yeah. The book itself without the signatures is worth it. But if you want to get the signatures, then you're going to have to get there quickly before they all run out of those, if they haven't already, according, like you just said. Now, before we get into this, I wanted to kind of ask you more of a softball question to start this thing off. Given that you've authored quite a few books, what would you say was your favorite one to write?
It's a good one. Probably Sword and Serpent, the fiction book about St. George and the dragon. That's, I wrote back in like 2006 or 2007. I started off telling nighttime stories to my oldest son, who's about to be 23. Stories. He was really in the night, so I would tell him all these St. George stories. And then a Catholic priest I knew said, you should put those like into a book. It'd be kind of fun. And so I drafted out and wrote my first book, about St. George and the dragon. There it is, Sword and Serpent. And then I sent it to all these agents and publishers for a whole year, and no one would ever publish it. So that was a big slap in the face, bummer. But it's become wildly successful. It's one of my best-selling books, and people know me for like Infiltration and Antichrist and Apocalypse and Crucified Rabbi, but there's like a whole fan base just on the fiction stuff. Sword and Serpent. It's a trilogy, and I love it when I meet people, and I love it when I met with you, Chris, that they're like, "Oh, I love Sword and Serpent," because to me that's like the hearth of my writing career. It's like the hearth and the heart. It's the center.
Well, especially considering that fictional stories like that are what they would call evergreen content, like things that will always be relevant no matter what time period you're living in. Like, for example, people that like Lord of the Rings, it doesn't matter when that was written, people still like it. You know what I mean?
And that was kind of my inspiration. I purposely wrote the trilogy to be longer than the Lord of the Rings. I just wanted to go all out. And I wanted to write like a Lord of the Rings type epic saga story, fictional, but also based in Catholic history. So, it has like St. Nicholas and Constantine and St. George, all these great saints and martyrs that lived at the same time. And so I kind of blend them all together into this narrative. And instead of like having magic, you have relics and, prayers and miracles. Instead of Gandalf, you have St. Nicholas, the historical Nicholas of Myra. So yeah, it's fun. I like it. It's good.
And the standalone Nikolaus is also great. I thought that was awesome, especially after I looked up the bilocation aspect of St. Nicholas, which I had no idea about.
Yeah.
But that was like early church, that's like early church legend that was a thing. So that's pretty cool.
He was a bilocator, and he miracles, and he's very much like a Gandalf figure in the early church. Yeah. Not to disrespect him by saying that, but I think for people to understand that St. Nicholas wasn't like in reality, like the early 300s, he was Padre Pio, like that kind of miraculous power. So
mentioned in lots and lots of things for the various things that God had given him. I do want to shout out Kennedy Hall, because I do agree the audiobook is fantastic.
Kennedy Hall is my go-to guy. I was amazed. I've always wanted to do the audio of Sword and Serpent. People asked it, but I actually recorded several chapters on my own. And the hard part was the girl voices. I have a deep voice. And so I do the girl voices. And I just sounded like a drag queen or something. And I'm like, it doesn't work. I can't record this. And then I heard Kennedy Hall's recording of Murder in the 33rd Degree by Father Charles Murr. And I thought, man, as I listened to that, I was like, man, he's so good at this. And so after I listened to the audio, I was like, hey, will you do some of my books? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And he crushed it on the Sword and Serpent trilogy. Like, it is so good to listen to the audio by Kennedy Hall. He does all these different voices and dialects and inflections. And it's almost like a theater drama. Like, it's very complex. So shout out to Kennedy Hall. Kennedy Hall also read the new book, Christian Patriot. He's my go-to guy. So yeah, shout out to Kennedy.
And if anybody's interested, I did interview Kennedy about 2 months ago, but he was also fun to have on. And like Taylor said, his audiobooks are like his narration style. You couldn't have picked a better person to narrate Minas or Saint. I'm assuming that's the stand-in for Saint Christopher, right?
Yeah. So in the Coptic church, there's a saint named Minas who has the exact same story as our Western Saint Christopher. So a lot of scholars think they're the same person. In fact, Christopher is just Greek for Christ bearer, which is a common title for a martyr. So it probably wasn't his name. So he's very likely the historical Saint Minas. And in the West, we know him as Christopher. So in the novel, I have him as Minas.
Yeah, which I did appreciate because the amount of saints in that book, and then when you start looking into it, it almost turns into like a school project to sort out who's who, what they did, where they came from. It was pretty cool. I mean, I really enjoyed it.
People in the Sword and Serpent geek community, they call it the Easter eggs. Like, you're constantly, because even like there's certain characters that appear for maybe just one page or a couple pages, and then they're not in the rest of the book, but they're actually a canonized saint and they lived at that time. So I kind of bring them in, and they might just have a very minor role, but they're a saint. They're in the book.
Oh, that's another one I did on audiobook was Antichrist and Apocalypse with Kennedy's. Yeah. Kennedy did that one too, right? That was him.
Kennedy did that one.
And that one was, so when I read that book, my headspace was in a very bad place as far as like Revelation and all that. And reading that book really kind of fixed where I was at headspace wise. So I really appreciated you writing that book as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So some more questions about your latest book though. Actually, this one's kind of more of a sidekick, but the Troops of St. George, they're filling a gap left by the Boy Scouts. First off, how did that kind of start? When did you decide to do that?
So that started, I believe, in 2013. So it's been going 12 years. That's amazing. Yeah, I was an Eagle Scout. Boy Scouts of America was formative to my life as an adolescent. I was in Cub Scouts and then joined the Boy Scouts and did film on. I was an Eagle Scout and just spent, once a month camping. And yeah, it's something that I wanted for my son so badly. The archery and the shotgun shooting and the small boat sailing and, the extreme backpacking that we did in the mountains, and just that whole experience was something that, I was kind of, I was born in the late 70s, grew up in the 80s, 90s. I think I was kind of like, one of that last generation where we didn't have like computers and certainly didn't have phones or anything like that. Video games were just kind of, you had Nintendo in the mid 80s, but yeah, that was just coming in. So, my youth was very much in the outdoors. I wanted my sons to have that. And then around, I think it was in 2013, the Boy Scouts of America announced that they were going to allow homosexual men to be troop leaders.
That was around that time frame?
Yeah, I think it was 2013. And so I was like, there's no possible way that I'm going to send my sons to that. And so I started, originally it was called Scouts of St. George. And, I had already kind of written the first draft of the book, St. George. So I was very devoted to St. George. I like St. George because, if you know the true legend of St. George, he's a of course, he delivers the young lady who's being sacrificed to a demon, to Moloch. And when he rescues her, her father, who's a king, says, you can marry her. You know, you've won my respect. You've won her hand. And he instead chooses celibacy to serve the Lord. So he's chivalrous. He's chaste. He's a celibate. He risks his life. And so I was like, that's the perfect model for young men in, the third millennium. So we named it Scouts of St. George. I was immediately cease and desisted, threatened to be sued by the Boy Scouts. They told me I couldn't.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they told me I couldn't call myself an Eagle Scout ever again, which is baloney. And it's funny. There's a restaurant near University of Dallas where I did my PhD, and around that time I went to, it's a kind of like a pub restaurant. I went there, called Spirit Grill, and I was sitting next to this guy at the bar. And I was like, what do you do for a living? He's like, I'm a lawyer for the Boy Scouts. And at that time, they were coming after me hard. So I just played dumb and just spent the whole night hearing from him. That was kind of interesting. But yeah, the Troops of St. George is like the Boy Scouts, except I wanted it to be much more daring. Because the Boy Scouts, they kind of got away from axes and hatchets and and became more about arts and crafts and gluing feathers to paper plates, and it kind of started getting lame. So I was like, we need to get back to the old school 1900s Boy Scouts. And then I want it to be intensely Catholic. So you have to be a Catholic. Your priest has to be on board with starting a troop. And then the key thing is your father or a male relative has to go on all campouts with you. And I wanted that because I want men to be involved in the outdoors, to bond with their sons. And I don't want kids getting molested or anything like that, With the dads there. And it's been awesome. You talk to these dads, a lot of these dads were city guys, and now they're starting fires without, matches and lighters, and they're chainsawing and building bridges and, cooking in Dutch ovens and on campfires. And there's always a mass component. Every young man has to carry a rosary and a pocket knife with them at all times. And yeah, it's very wholesome, very good. Go to troopsofstgeorge.org if you have a young man and get involved. Very Catholic. One of the rules I put in there is you can only have communion on the tongue at Troops of St. George campouts because there's no running water. No one can wash their hands. So you have to receive on the tongue, kind of a, subtle thing there to make sure that everybody's receiving on the tongue. But yeah, it's awesome. Troopsofstgeorge.org, still going great all over the country, all over the world. There's troops outside the U.S.
It's funny you say that because we basically instilled the exact same rule with our kids as they're going, because our oldest just had first communion last year, and we went to a church recently where there was no kneeler for communion. And I was wondering what's he going to do? He's presented with this task where I've always told him you got to kneel and receive on the tongue. And nope, he went right up there and kneeled right on the floor and waited for the priest to come to him. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm so glad that he did that, awesome. Because I don't know what I would have done at 8 years old, but he did exactly what I expected him to do. So I was impressed.
That's awesome.
Let's see here. What do you think the Troop St. George is doing to produce Christian patriots? I mean, you've kind of explained a lot of it, but I've noticed there's a lot of there's a lot of Patriot built in, with the fathers being there, and the aspect of it's an all boys group. Scouts are letting girls in. What do you think about the Troops of St. George will make Christian patriots?
Well, the important word is patriot. All right. So the book is Christian Patriot. It was I originally wanted to title the book. It was Restoring Christendom, or The Fall and Rise in Christendom. That was the original title. And we ran it by the late Charlie Kirk, God rest his soul. And he didn't care for that. Right? He's like, I don't know about Christendom, and so we eventually went to Christian Patriot. And I'm glad we did. God bless Charlie Kirk for pushing back on the Christendom title, because patriot, according to Thomas Aquinas, patriotism is a virtue, it's a sub-virtue under justice. And patriotism is love for patria. What is patria? Patria is Latin for fatherland. So Thomas Aquinas says that patriotism is built on the commandment, honor your father and mother. You're not just honoring your nation, your natus, where you're born. You're honoring your father. You're honoring your fatherland. And so I think, yes, the connection between Christian Patriot, Troops of St. George, I think me insisting on the presence of fathers in the Troops of St. George and making that part of the charism and the core identity of the Troops of St. George, that this is a father-son activity. You don't drop off your sons and go play golf or have a weekend free. You are with your son around the campfire, praying the rosary, chopping wood. That's the thing. Okay. Patriotism is love of fatherland. You can only love fatherland if you love your father. So It's this connection of men, fathers and sons together. And that's how we have to rebuild things. We've vilified men. We've vilified masculinity. We've said fathers are bad. And where there are no fathers, there's chaos. And all this, of course, Thomas Aquinas is just going to, ratchet all this up to God the Father and the eternal love of the Father for the Son, and the eternal love of the Father, Son is the Holy Ghost. So yeah, it's all theological. It's all connected. Patriotism is love of Father. Troops of St. George, Father, Son. That's it. It's all based on virtue.
And do you think the separation of fathers and sons in the Scouts, because there was female troop leaders when I did Boy Scouts at the Cub Scouts more than Boy Scouts.
We had one female leader, but I don't know if she went to campouts. I think even then, yeah, there was certainly no girls in the troop.
Right.
There was one mother, but even in the troops are like, oh, can my wife come out and bring some brownies? No, women are not coming out. Okay. This is for fathers and for sons. Because as soon as you bring a mother in or a sister or any woman, it totally changes the dynamics. This is how it has to be.
Well, the question really was more along the lines of, what do you think the beginning and maybe the nail in the coffin for the Boy Scouts has been? Because I remember growing up, Boy Scouts seemed like it was supposed to be a boy organization. But then when you would go, like I said, there were girl troop leaders. There were the moms were there a lot because the moms were dropping off or involved in the troop campouts and stuff. I know you already mentioned the change that occurred right around the time you started Troops of St. George, which that's a pretty detrimental change. But do you think that was really the beginning of the end, or do you think there was something else that may have spurred that?
I mean, they started this thing called Venture Scouts, which was a co-ed spinoff. But no, I mean, they went the way of the culture. First they started having the male-female integration. Then they had the same-sex scoutmasters, and then they just called themselves Scouts, and they blended, boys and girls together, and that killed it. It killed it, and also they were also moving away. So Boy Scouts was always about virtue and citizenship and being an outdoorsman. Right? That's what Boy Scouts was. I think as the world started becoming more and more electronic, and probably even when I was in it in the 80s and 90s, it was already some places were already more arts and crafts. Let's glue beads and feathers on the paper plates and this kind of kindergarten stuff. That already, I think, was killing it. Like, you just look at like the firemanship merit badge from like the early 1900s, and then the firemanship badge in the 2000s, and it's night and day. Like, one of them is like how to put out fires and create fires and all that. And then it gets to like, what are the dangers of fire for the environment? Like, it's not even about firefighting anymore. It's total weak sauce, and I think they just adopted the plan of the world. They just became woke and secular and lame. And now I think they're about bankrupt.
And if I remember correctly, weren't the Boy Scouts initially endorsed by quite a bit of the Catholic Church in America? Initially?
The origins of, Baden-Powell is seen as the kind of godfather of it all. Early on, and particularly in France, the scouting movements were very kind of based on like crusader mentality, like pilgrimages and being outdoors. And even to this day, I think, if you go to like the Chartres pilgrimage, you'll see these scouts, these Catholic scouts. Our American BSA comes from Baden-Powell and more of the Anglo-Saxon tradition, which is going to be more Protestant. Yeah, early on in Europe, there's scouting movements that are emerging and very close to to Catholic practice.
Well, no worries with the Troops of St. George because it is a Catholic organization, and I think that will help keep that running longer term than a secular organization like the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Here's another question for you then. So given the title of the book and the general disdain that Protestants have for the papacy, do you think that spiritual and civilizational decay would be because of that lack of spiritual fatherhood, because they reject the Pope, they reject Catholicism? It's kind of in their name with Protestantism.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, any rejection of truth is going to be harmful to the self and to society. And the rejection of the papacy is certainly part of that. But as I talk about in the book, Christian Patriot, a big part of that is rejection of matrimony as a sacrament. That happened in the 1500s. So once you demote matrimony, as Henry VIII did, Martin Luther, John Calvin, Cranmer, all of them demoted marriage. Once you change the theology of marriage and lower the status of marriage, you are already on a civilizational descent. Things are going to get bad, and that's what we've seen. So they redefine marriage. Wasn't redefined 10 years ago. Marriage was redefined in the 1500s. And that's something, my book, Christian Patriot, is written to a general audience. It's my first book, besides the fiction ones that are not like a Catholic book. All right. So this is addressed to civilization, to people of goodwill. But I really do go off in the book. There's a chapter on matrimony. You can't redefine matrimony. And it's something that's problematic with the Protestant Reformation. And Protestants need to own that. And then they need to become Catholic. But, even the Eastern Orthodox, they say it's a sacrament. It's one of their 7 mysteries. So, we're in the problem we are now because nations are the assembly of families. Families are only protected and properly ratified by matrimony, by marriage. If you don't have the proper definition of marriage and you deny the supernatural vocation of matrimony, which is what we believe as Catholics, if you deny that belief, you've already redefined marriage and your civilization is already moving towards decay. And I think that's really, it's not controversial, but I really want Protestants to realize that, they think it's all about Bible alone, faith alone, papal corruption, Catholic corruption. But like as a society, as the decline that we're in, it's about marriage, and you guys started that ball rolling.
Yeah, and it's what's funny about the divorce of Henry VIII was it led to the I'll say the stolen property of the Catholic Church in England, right? And this was actually a talking point of Bug Hall, but I'm just going to point it out because I think you'd like this interesting story he told. Basically, the consolidation of wealth from the stolen assets of the Catholic Church during Henry VIII's divorce led to industrialization of civilization and the death of the family in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting.
And a great way for people to understand this, I know Downton Abbey is a fictional kind of soap opera show. And Downton Abbey is not a historical place, but most of the wealthy mansions are something abbey, right? Like Downton Abbey. Why are they called abbey? Because they used to be abbeys for monks and nuns. And King Henry VIII took them from the monastery, they removed all the monks and nuns, and handed these beautiful, immense properties and all their buildings to his friends, the nobles, and they moved in. So that's why it's called Downton Abbey. That's why all these places are called abbey. That's property stolen by Henry VIII and given to his friends.
Yeah, and it took a long time, but we got Gen Z is allegedly more Catholic than Anglican. So we'll see who gets the last laugh on that.
In England, they say that there's more people attending Catholic Mass than there is Anglican services in 2025. So maybe we'll get the abbeys back, or we'll build bigger and better ones. Who knows?
I would love that. Although we'd probably need to get people committed to multiple century constructions like we used to. It seems like with short-term goals and successes with things, people really don't want to build something that takes generations and builds a legacy. They'd rather do something short-term, and they don't care if it falls over in their lifetime.
So this goes back to Christian Patriot. I'm glad you said that, because civilization is the building upon the previous generation. So Chris, you and I want to build something for the Marshalls, my family. I want to build something, and I want my kids to be more highly educated, more holy, have even better marriages, better families, better everything. I'm living my life to equip them and give them something better. And then they receive that. This is called a patrimony, same word, patria, patrimony, patriotism. Yeah. They receive that patrimony, then they build on it, and then they give it to my grandkids, and so on. And when you do that over centuries, you get what people call today Western civilization. It's actually Catholic civilization. But right. That takes centuries to do. And it's the mindset of, I'm going to sacrifice my time, my efforts, my money, my everything to give something better to the next generation, the third generation, the fourth generation. And that same mentality is, we're going to build a cathedral. We're going to spend our money and our time and our talents, and we will never see it completed. It may take, some of these cathedrals took 800 years.
Yeah.
That is the mentality that is Catholic. And I think one of the reasons why Gen Z is constantly bashing the boomers is because Gen Z is probably the first generation to enter adulthood and look around and say, the American dream is not here. So the idea that we're going to build something and then give a better society and a better nation to our children and grandchildren, that process was not done in the 1900s. And this is why Gen Z is so frustrated. And this is why a lot of time, and of course, if you're a boomer watching, that doesn't mean that all boomers did that. My father's a boomer and did a great job. I'm very grateful to him. But that's what we're seeing here is Gen Z has grown up and has realized that society and civilization and decency is in a decline mode. And what we should be doing out of Christian virtue and obligation is building something better and handing it on. So civilization just gets better and better and better and better. So again, this all goes back to patriotism, patrimony, patria, everything.
Yeah. And part of that, I know you said you want to give better things to your kids. But we also want our kids to be better than we are, right? We want them to be a better future than even what we are doing now. And I think that was what was missing in a lot of my generation was they gave their kids better stuff, kind of, but they didn't teach them to be better. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, I mean, it's not just you have pretty cathedrals and town squares and beautiful places to live. It's also, the first generation of people in Europe that were baptized, those people were worshiping idols and were cannibals in many places, right? We like to maybe think that we weren't like that, but, Europeans were like that. And over time, you start to see this progress. Universities, hospitals, all these things start happening. Civilization gets better because of the infusion of Jesus Christ into the culture.
Absolutely. I read a book about Etonian Germany. It's kind of a niche and obscure book, but in it, they're talking about during the conversion of the Poles and the Slavs, like some of their retained habits or their retained rituals included, like when the leader of the tribe would die, the wife would jump on the pyre and burn with him. And it's like, oh, that's definitely not a Christian ritual.
Yeah.
But eventually now Poland is a very Catholic country. So just because it starts out,
and they found these amulets, like at first, they'll see like in northern Scandinavia, and they'll wear like the hammer of Thor. And then they even show like they'll start having hammers of Thor that have like Christ on them. And like over time, the hammer becomes more and more like a cross. Like, there's an accumulative growth and appreciation of what Catholicism is and who Christ is. And there is that kind of paganism that was infused into the culture, and it takes generations to cut it out. And that's what's kind of sad right now is we have so much paganism and evil and Marxism in our society. Even though Gen Z may be on fire, and we hope they are, it's probably going to take Gen Z, alpha, beta, gamma to like, if we can do this, to get things back on track.
Oh, absolutely. And really, the people that are in our generation and Gen Z, they need to get married and have kids. I mean, they have to do it.
You know what? God bless Charlie Kirk. That was one of the big messages of Charlie Kirk, is get married and have kids. And in the book, Christian Patriot, I have a whole chapter on birth rates, demographics. Yep. It's the conversation no one wants to have. And if replacement level is 2.11 average babies per woman, right? Per woman in the whole society, 2.11. Once you get below 1.9 babies per woman, it is almost mathematically impossible to get back to 2.11. Okay. These are like exponential line curves, right? They're not straight lines. And once you get into like 1.6, 1.5, you're over. You're washed. Okay. You're chopped. You're cooked. You're done. It's over.
Civilizational decay.
You cannot get back. And right now, let me tell you, Spain, under 1.5, Portugal, Italy, these places that are below 1.9, they're cooked. They're not coming back. They can start having 8 kids and it's probably not going to come back. Not only are they fighting against this exponential curve of birth rates, but they're also fighting against Mohammedans, Muslims, Saracens, who are coming in and having 4 average per woman. It's over. It's over for them. And we just need to accept it, right? It's like someone is so terminal, they're not going to make it. I know we're rooting for Europe, but like places like Portugal and Spain and Greece absolutely could. They're not coming back. And we need to just take a moment and say, we can't do that in America.
Yeah. And Taylor, I just want to let you know, it's not going to be the fault of my wife and I. We've got 5 kids so far. And I haven't even turned 33 yet. So.
I got 8. You got 5. I mean, we're doing our work over here. And it's not easy, but it's worth it, my friends. Meeting the love of your life, marrying a great Catholic woman, and then having 8 kids is the best thing I've ever done. It is the end all be all. And you guys out there and you girls out there need to do this. The idea that you're going to get married and travel and have a little bit of a career and then buy a house. I mean, my wife and I, when we got married, we lived in a 1-bedroom, tiny apartment. The kitchen was like 3 by 7. It was tiny, maybe not even that big. And that's where we, conceived our first child and got it all started. And it's a struggle, but it's worth it. And we need young people to realize if you want meaning, if you want joy, if you want happiness, and you're called to the married life, get started. A career, a 3-bedroom house, whatever. Don't wait for that. Get started.
Absolutely. I got married at 23. My wife's the same age as I am. And I
was 23. My wife was 22.
Yeah.
We were poor. Man, we were eating canned food. And for us, going out to like a dinner was pizza. We'd go get some pizza. But totally worth it. It was awesome.
Yeah. Charlie said, if I remember correctly, and I hope I don't quote him incorrectly, he said, have more kids than you can afford. And I agree with that because you get more creative financially the more kids you have.
Well, I actually think one of the reasons I've been successful is because kids came every 2 years. And so I thought, well, I should write another book. No, maybe I should start a podcast. Maybe I should start New St. Thomas Institute. Maybe I should start my own publishing press. Like you're always thinking like, how can I make an extra 10K this year? Right. And that, if there's babies coming and you're always thinking that way, you start to think about how can we grow? And there's a great, I think it's a Spanish proverb. Every baby comes with a loaf of bread. And the idea is when you're open to babies and a baby comes, there's some possibility that God's going to bless you and you'll have more bread.
Absolutely. I have to say, it's not all me. God is helping me with this. That is for sure. Because every time I think we can't do it again, we keep pulling through and we keep having more kids. And it doesn't seem to, hasn't bankrupted us. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about men, if you aren't married or if you are married and your wife's on contraception, like, you can play video games and get really into golf and do all this stuff. But if every 2 to 3 years there's a new baby, and it's not like someone's putting a gun to your head, like, I'm going to kill you if you don't go work harder. But there is a little baby there.
Yeah.
And that baby needs stuff.
Yep.
And it makes men become creative, and it makes men ambitious. And, you know, people will say to me like, wow, you have these companies and you've written 12 books and you do all this stuff and you have 8 kids. How's that make sense? I'm like, that's why it makes sense. I have 8 kids. Like, the hustle never ends. Like, you just got to keep going.
Yeah. And it does make you as a man work harder, because if you don't, well, that's your family. That is what you are striving for at this point as a man, you know, other than bringing them to Christ, right?
Let me add something to that. Men want to be respected. Women want to be loved, right? If you're a man and you're doing this and you're open to life and you're working harder and harder and trying to make all this fit, and it's difficult, all right? And your wife sees that, she respects you, which is what you want, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why a lot of men lose respect from their wife, and this is a big problem in our culture and why we have so much divorce, is people have gone to having 1 or 2 kids. And then once you have 1 or 2 kids and they hit middle school, like, you're kind of on easy mode unless your kids get into real big trouble in high school.
Yeah.
And that drive and that collaborative work between the husband and the wife and just making all this happen, I think it breaks down. And I think that might be one reason why a lot of marriages fail, because they try to just kind of put things in like 4th gear and like cruise control, like easy mode. And so you lose that respect element.
And it does also teach extra responsibility to children, especially the older ones, because and I've never had any of my children say we should not have more kids. They're always like, no, bring on more siblings, you know.
Why not? We have 8. My kids are like, we can't have any more. And they're like, well, we can adopt some kids. And I'm like, yeah, we could. Yeah. But you're right. Kids always want more kids.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. They want more brothers and sisters. So
yeah, my father-in-law always said it's not a division of love when you have more kids. It's just more love. And I really respect him for that, because I've always kept that with me since he said it.
I tell people it's not addition, it's multiplication.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So here's another good question to move on from that one, since we're talking about family, is to accomplish the goals in Christian Patriot. Would it be better to have more Catholic media and entertainment, or to have us exit that space and go offline? Which would you think would be preferable?
Have us what?
Go offline or unplugged alternatives. Which do you think would be better for the family?
No, don't unplug. I think that's ridiculous. Yeah. What I think should happen, ideally, is, you know, since the tragedy with Charlie Kirk, I'm still dealing with it, but I think it's a shame that we have these celibate bishops and these celibate priests who are celibate. They don't have wives and children.
Mm-hmm.
They've signed up for this. And there are some that are doing great. All right. And I don't need to name them. Y'all know who they are. But they have in a way pushed the Charlie Kirks to the front line to fight the culture war. Who are the voices out there on college campuses, on the internet, saying, get married, have children, don't get into sexual deviancy, don't sit at home and smoke weed all day, live a heroic life, join, you know, you need a crusade in your life, return to Jesus Christ. You know, there's this influencer class out there. And what we saw last week is that's now got scopes on it. You know, there's bullets flying over this. And it's like, and I've known for a long time, I've said it before, Taylor Marshall should not be on YouTube talking about Thomas Aquinas and patrimony and Christian Patriot and how to restore the culture. Like, the bishops and the cardinals and the priests should be doing that. But we only see them occasionally come out for like a George Floyd mass or BLM riots or whatever. And I'm kind of frustrated this past week, now that we lost the life of Charlie Kirk. I'm like, why are the celibate guys who gave up wives and kids, why are they pushing the married guys to the front lines? We shouldn't be doing this. There should be a priest on campus doing what Charlie Kirk was doing.
I 100% agree with you. And Actually, one of the priests that I know that I'm quite good friends with, he was catechized by a priest at the college he went to, and convinced of his needing to discern the priesthood, and then he became a priest. And so it is powerful to have priests on the campus doing the work that the priests are intended to do with catechizing, especially people that age, because that's when you lose your faith in a lot of cases, at least with this current culture. Now, do you think the reason why college campuses have this kind of drought of faith for kids who go to college is more due to the fact it's their first separation from the parents, especially ones that go away? Or do you think it's more of a concept, like the culture that's doing that?
I think it's primarily sex. I think it's premarital sex.
Yeah.
A lot of these schools have co-ed dorms. Like there's literally a door 4 feet from your door. And even people who are raised conservative and are raised Christian, not even necessarily, maybe some kind of Protestant, whatever, the temptation when they go to college and they're literally like putting condoms and all kinds of things, in your welcome bag and all that is just pushing sexual deviancy. And kids, I mean, they're 18, they go to college, they get in this, and it's very powerful, and it's everyone knows it's very pleasurable, and it creates bonds, and it's meant for matrimony, right? It's meant to bond and create a family. And so this happens, and when you're sleeping around on Saturday night, it makes it, even if you're somewhat committed to going to church on Sunday, it makes it very difficult to go. And then you add another layer on top of that of going to class and then just hearing Marxism and evolution and critical race theory. And those two things right there just do a number on someone who's 18 years old. So I really think that we have no business, more and more every year, I'm more convinced of this, no business sending your kids to public school, K through 12. And then even college is risky, but I think if you can send them to a place that promotes chastity and Catholicism, and there's only a few places, that's what you have to do as a Catholic parent.
And there's even a trade school that's coming up now too, specifically Catholic.
Exactly. So we have to, people ask me, can we get America back? I think a structural recovery of America, maybe we have 5 years to like get the ball rolling, but I think we're pretty close to the end. More and more I'm telling people we have to capture and create enclaves, parishes, neighborhoods, schools, communities, colleges, but we have to create these microcosms, these micro communities, and we have to grow those. That's why I'm a big advocate for people moving to places in the country. Is, if you're in a place where your wife doesn't have Catholic friends and your kids don't have friends who pray the St. Michael prayer and the Angelus, and you don't have friends like that, you probably need to move if you can. And I know that's, hard for a lot of people, but think about the investment. And someone brought up recently, in human history, the number one solution to societal problems has always been move your geographic location. It's been done in Europe. It's been done in Asia. It's been done everywhere. The United States of America is built on that. If your current situation is bad, moving geographically is often a solution. And so we need to move together. We need to have, and I talk about this in Christian Patriot and on the podcast, like the whole society of joining families with marriage and godfathers and godmothers and priesthood and all these things create a culture. Catholicism has done that, and we're going to have to kind of relearn how to do all that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with, what is it, like the Catholic land movement exists, and then there's like Catholic cities that are coming up. I've seen a few plans for some. It's very interesting. I always question whether, because like in Catholicism, there's so many different like in groups, we'll say. So like when they're building these cities, is it built on the more?
Like people have said, would you want to live in a Catholic, one of these starter towns, Catholic towns? There's one in Tyler. And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, well, why not? And I was like, I mean, you're going to be dealing with, like you said, there's different in groups, but like, oh, that guy's a married deacon and his daughter wore yoga pants. And like, how does the community handle that? Like these are going to be, the situations, but you know what? That might be good as well. I know that several years ago, maybe 10 years ago now, I just made the decision. I have a little journal. Who are my friends? Who do I want to be my friends? And then just making the decision, if I want to have good friends and men that I admire, I have to initiate with them. I have to provide activities. I have to take them to lunch, invite them over. Like I have to make these investments. And then I've also learned the only way you can really keep friendships going is you always have to be trying. And I'm not always good at this, but you have to constantly try to overflow into people's life, like benefit them, and if more and more people perceive you as a taker and not a giver, you lose all your friends. So you should always be thinking, how do I give into this person's life? And that's hard too, especially as you have kids and you're weighing everything. And I've done some podcasts like on friendship, and I say you want to be the Samwise Gamgee.
Yeah.
Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. Like that's the model. How do you get Frodo to keep going? And I think if you think of yourself as a friend in that sense, instead of like, why don't people do this stuff for me? And why don't people do the, that's bad. You have to think, how do I get Frodo to the mountain? And that's the Samwise Gamgee. And if you can start to think of yourself as a friend in that way, I think you'll start to have some good friends, Catholic friends too.
I will just say you are 100% correct on that. Any friendship where the perception is that they take more than they give, or they're a mooch, or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to label that relationship, it definitely puts like a negative in your subconscious related to that person.
Well, it over time, and honestly, look, all of us who are friends, we've all been in the needy position. It might be illness, it might be financial strait, it might be, there's all times when we're in a deficit and people build into us. But if it's always like that for years on years, it just suffocates a friendship.
Yep.
Because people can only go so long, You can only, if you're Samwise, you can only carry Frodo up so many mountains, right? And then out of wires, I just can't carry anymore, and it suffocates.
All right, so we've addressed the college question I had, but I do have an additional one related to courtship. So like when a kid turns 18, right, the government recognizes them as an adult. And as a father with daughters and sons, you really don't have any control over who they marry per the government. How would you address that as a Catholic father?
I think it's totally different for males and females.
Yes.
Thomas Aquinas, which is the tradition I follow, sons reach the age of majority and they still have to honor their father and mother. And I believe they still are under the discipline of their father and mother. And fathers and mothers can do things to continue to exert influence over their sons. But for young ladies, and Father Erpiger teaches this as well, and Thomas Aquinas, until they become married or a nun, they are still under their father's protection. And that's whether they live at home or not. And so there is definitely a double standard here. And this has to do with women being the weaker sex. They're more fragile. They're more vulnerable. Look at that poor girl on the train in Charlotte, how easily she was attacked, how easily her life was taken from her. So we as fathers have a double standard with our children, and the daughters receive different treatment from the sons. So I had to say that at the very beginning. I don't care what the government says about that.
I agree with that 100%.
And then you can't control who they marry. I have a really good friend, Greg. He has 12 kids. Some of the people in the live chat know Greg. And Greg says, we don't necessarily arrange marriages, but we kind of do.
Yeah.
And what you do is you create, like I was talking about earlier, cultures, communities of people where you are you're fostering a community, and within that assembly of families, there are other people that share your values, and that you would say, man, I would love for my son to maybe one day marry her. You don't say that out loud, but you are creating, this, it's not infallible, not inerrant, but you
Right.
are creating this loop, and you're bringing people into your lives that share the same vision for the future. And I think that's also true, even to expand that and say, send your child to a Catholic college like Benedictine college. There's going to be some rotten apples there, but you also kind of know that probably 85% of the people there are, if not every Sunday, daily mass families, against contraception, definitely pro-life consistently. And so what you're doing is you're just constantly creating or constantly placing your children within these enclaves where you are raising the chances of who they meet and who they marry. And then if you bring courtship into it, especially with the daughters, as a dad, you just got to be, and with sons, you just have to be on top of that.
Yeah, I've had a conversation with my 8-year-old that was probably above his head, but he was asking me about marriage, and I was like, well, you do realize that if you ever want to marry somebody, you do have to talk to their father first. He's like, what? And I was like, yeah, you have to approach the father, ask permission, get the permission, and then ask the daughter.
Which shows that there's the double standard. There should be, girls don't go and talk to the boyfriend's dad. Like, that'd be stupid, right? Because the idea is the girl is under the father's protection,
right? And
a man is coming up and saying, through the holy sacrament of matrimony, this is why sacraments are important. I am considering, I'm going to pursue, or I am going to fully ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. These all conversations along the way. Like with my adult daughters, I have said, if you go to coffee with a guy, whatever, but as soon as you've been on like 1 to 3 dates, you have to notify mom and me immediately, and we must meet this young man. I have to vet him. I got to give him a theology test in Latin. And again, I think the father on the front end should be there. If there's any questions or anything uncomfortable that needs to be discussed or discovered, the father can do that for the daughter and protect the daughter. That's what fathers should be doing. So yeah, we may not be like the full Hindu thing where we're like, when you're 4 and he's 4, y'all are getting to sign a document. But from the very inception of anything romantic, the parent should be involved.
Yeah, and it is it's not symbolic. It's an actual handoff at the wedding when the father walks the bride up.
Yeah.
Like that's like a last chance for a father to be like, never mind, this ain't working,
Yeah.
We're walking out now.
And the theology is, again, women are the weaker sex. They need to be protected.
Right.
Right. Like after this thing happened to Arena on the train, I just sent a text out. We have a family text. And I was like, listen, never again in your entire life will you ever leave your mom, your sisters, spouses, relatives, females, or even any female alone in public. Like, we don't live in a safe world. Like, this is just the rule for the marshals now on. This is how we live, right? That's because women are more fragile, right? And so there is a sacramental and there is a metaphysical and physical transference of the protection from the father to the son-in-law. And it's part of our culture, and it's completely good, virtuous.
I think this is asked tongue-in-cheek, but somebody asked, what would you do if they're a Molinist?
We could work with that. We could work with Molinists.
Fair enough. All right. So here's kind of the last question I sent you in the chat earlier, but the aspect that seems to be gone from Christians, especially in America, is the idea of charity that comes from the church, from the parishioners, because of the welfare state we've kind of created with this government. I mean, I'm not saying we, because we obviously didn't create that. The government created that over years. But how important would it be to reestablish this type of charity in a Catholic nation? or a Christian nation, right? Even.
In the book Christian Patriot, I talk about we must destroy the wall of separation of church and state.
Yep.
It's evil. It's wrong. It's condemned by the church. It hasn't worked. We did the experiment. We said, hey, let's create the most perfect country with some virtue base and natural law and natural rights. And then let's do the wall of separation of church state. It's been a horrible experiment. It's over. It's done. We must integrate church and state. And until we do that, we're going to have the problems that we're experiencing.
Yeah, because I will say this, and this seems to be true. Every Catholic charity handles money 1,000 times better than the government.
And they don't even do that great.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah.
But here's the thing. Charity is more effective when it's actually moved by what we call in English charity, right? If I am going to donate $1 million to a, I don't know, orphanage or pro-life thing, I'm going to be on the board. I'm going to be going in there once a week. I'm going to be praying for them at mass. My family's probably going to get involved in it and be part of a legacy. And that's all good for that charity, right? But
Yep.
if I'm taxed out of my paycheck and it goes to the IRS in DC and then the Senate and the House, and they pass these bills, and part of it goes to Ukraine and part of it goes to Planned Parenthood and part of it goes to some good stuff. I don't know what that is. And it goes to Israel and all that. I am so checked out on that, and it allows for so much abuse, and it doesn't allow for what God intends, which is charity is not just money. It's money, yes, it's alms, plus our involvement.
Right.
And what's beautiful about, you look at Catholic hospitals, how they used to run, the nurses were nuns. People were donating money, but it was a truly charitable organization. And it was about healing and caring for the sick and the dying. And now we've moved it towards a corporate, and it's just people are, they're cogs. They have no dignity. They're getting euthanized. It's about profit margins. And that's the problem. So if we could destroy this whole idea of separation of church and state, and then the state begin to once again say, we want the churches, the religious orders, the friars, the nuns, the charitable arm of the church to start doing the societal charity and get people involved in it, it would be so much better.
100%. I love that you brought up the nuns, because one of the missing links of the church, especially since Vatican II, has been the number of nuns we lost. Nobody talks about it. Everybody talks about the priest shortage, but I mean, we dropped by, I think we're at like less than 30% of the nuns we had before Vatican II.
There's a chart in infiltration that gives you the nun number, but
that's probably where I read that.
It's feminism. It's feminism. And, I was talking to a friend recently, and his kids go to a Catholic girls' school, and they had, the nuns from the 60s and 70s, and they've pretty much all gone extinct. There's not much nuns there, but the nuns that are there, they're like, well, we need to have more career days for the girls. And they want the girls at the Catholic school to become boss girls, feminist women. And that's the problem, is that generation of nuns somehow got into their head, we need girls to be boss girls. And what we really need is to go back to Catholicism and say, God is calling you to either be a consecrated virgin, nun, religious, or he's calling you to be a mother, matrimony. And the nuns lost their vocation. And, I remember when I first became a Catholic, Chris, and learning that there were like liberal, like even pro-choice nuns, I was just like, how is that even possible? I thought nuns were like all these cute little Mother Teresa. All they did was love people and care and love Jesus. And they're like, no, there's some like really whacked out liberal feminist nuns. And then I remembered, I think it's Matthew 25. There's the whole parable of the foolish virgins. Some of them have oil and are waiting for the bridegroom, Jesus.
Yep.
And some of them squander it. And Jesus locks them out. So I was like, oh, even Jesus warned us of the good nuns and the bad nuns. So
Yeah, there was actually a clip from a movie where they're showing the reaction of the nuns. I don't know what movie it was in, but it made me so sad watching the reaction of these nuns to finding out what was happening after Vatican II and how their role in the church was going to change. And I don't know how you fix that at this point, but I will say this. There was a group of young girls and they had a nun present, and the nun was asking them, like, and she was like full habit nun, not like
A real nun. She was a real nun.
A real nun, full habit, everything. Yeah. And so she was asking like the girls in this group, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my daughter, no hesitation whatsoever, I want to be a mom. And I was like, it touched me. I was like, oh man, because it says so much about my wife that my daughter sees that and wants to be that.
That's right. And this is how we have to begin to restore Catholic civilization. We must, and I talk about this in the book Christian Patriot, we must as a culture say the heroes are mothers, and honoring motherhood and protecting motherhood, so that every little girl wants to be a mother. And then if they're willing to sacrifice that and to be a nun, it's even a higher vocation, because they're sacrificing the call to be a mother. And we have to glorify that. People say, well, how do we get rid of abortion? How do we get rid of contraception? We have to hold up motherhood. The ability and the gift and the calling to bring new life out of your body. We have to elevate that. And unfortunately, it's not elevated from when they're little girls watching, I don't know what crap, Barbie and Netflix and all that, be a boss girl, be an e-girl, strong, independent woman. You don't need no man, all that. That is destroying little girls' souls. It's so sad.
Yeah. And, the most important woman in history, what was her role? Mother.
Yeah. Mother and virgin. You have both vocations. You have mother, you have the vocation of wedded motherhood, and you also have consecrated virginity. Of course, she's the Immaculate Conception, Mother of God, unique with her. But yeah, both married women and consecrated virgins, find their inspiration and graces from the immaculate hands of the Virgin.
So here's a question I've asked a lot of guests, and I hope you don't mind if I ask you this here. I didn't put it in the chat, but I'm sure I'm hoping that you agree with me on this one. But Genesis 3:15, is it he or she shall crush thy head?
It's probably she. I think she. Even medieval Hebrew scholars like Maimonides said she. So, but at the end of the day, it's he and she. I mean, obviously Christ destroys Satan,
right?
And it's done through the incarnation, and Our Lady's the vehicle and the human mother of the Logos, the God the Son. And there's even a line in Romans where it says, the God of peace will soon crush Satan underneath your feet, your plural, speaking to the Christians.
Right.
So say God will, over time and at the end times, at the apocalypse, he will even crush Satan under, Paul says, your feet, plural. So it's Christ's feet, it's Our Lady's feet, and through,
the bridegroom of Jesus, the church
as well. A lot of feet.
Yeah, a lot of feet.
Yeah.
All right. Did you have any questions for me, Taylor?
Who's your favorite saint?
Who's my favorite saint? Actually, I think it's Saint Irenaeus. I just recently read Against Heresies.
Right.
That was one of my favorite books ever because he's so sarcastic about the Gnostics.
Yeah.
Loved it.
That's awesome. Is that your confirmation saint?
No, that was so I got confirmed in 8th grade when I didn't know much about my faith, poor catechesis and all that. I'm Saint Mark the Evangelist was my
great.
So it's still a good saint. I really appreciate, him. But it was, 8th grade me was like flipping open the Bible, which saint? Oh, look, this guy wrote one of the Gospels.
Saint Mark. Hey, you did pretty good. You did pretty good.
I could have done a lot worse, that's for sure. Yeah. Although if they're all saints, then really, is there any bad choices?
No.
Any other things?
Let's see. What's your number one goal for your podcast?
For my podcast, I hope that for at least a few people out there, this podcast will replace some activity they could have been doing that wasn't Catholic.
Okay.
That's why I do it at night, so that
Nice.
instead of going off onto, what kind of websites, they could tune into this, maybe enjoy a little conversation, a little theology, whatever, and then go to bed without having visited those kinds of websites.
Based. Good. Love it.
All right.
Well, thanks, Chris. This was fun. I really enjoyed our conversation, and thanks to everybody. Yeah, everybody get Christian Patriot. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Your local Catholic bookstore probably has it. If you want a signed copy, ChristianPatriotBook.com. ChristianPatriotBook.com. Also, ChristianPatriotBook.com has links to like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the other places. So if you just want one place to go, ChristianPatriotBook.com. I'd appreciate it if you got a copy and read it.
And definitely check out his older books too.
Yeah, get Sword and Serpent. Go to Amazon.com and get Christian Patriot and Sword and Serpent by Taylor Marshall. You'll love them.
We did have somebody ask when the movie's coming, Taylor, and I want to know too. So let us know.
What? I've had 2 people ask me to buy the movie rights.
Really?
So I think it'll happen. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I definitely.
The problem is I think it would be kind of expensive to do. You have to have beginning of 4th century Roman Empire, very Gladiator 2. But then you'd also have to have like the CGI to do all the miracles and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you would.
But AI's making it more affordable, so maybe we can get it done.
Yeah. Oh, somebody said let's get Mel.
That'd be awesome.
That would be. All right, Taylor. I'm gonna roll the outro. I really appreciate you being here. And keep up the good work. You've got lots of people depending on the kind of stuff you've been doing. So really appreciate what you do. And Dad with the webcam and all that. That's if you want to sign out with the Be Salty thing, I would love it.
Chris, thanks for having me on. Everybody, please like and follow and subscribe the Crash Canon podcast. You guys don't know what that means to podcasters. Like, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It means the world to Chris. So if you're watching right now, hit subscribe, hit like, and then hit share. Share it on X, Facebook, whatever. So please support Chris. And until next time, remember, our Lord Jesus Christ says you're the light of the world and the salt of the earth. So go out there and be salty. God bless. Godspeed. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.